As I've grown up, it's been interesting to see all the different iterations of Spider-Man visualized and played out by different directors and actors on the big screen. Some movies haven't been the best, but they're all interesting attempts at the end of the day. I'm a Spider-Man fan, and you bet I'll be buying a ticket to any new movie no matter what. Anyway, even though there have been countless Spider-Man movies that have come out, regardless of their quality, it's hard to deny the influence that Sam Raimi Spider-Man has left on newer Spider-Man films. The issue I seem to run into every time I go out and watch a new Spider-Man film is how certain things, especially action sequences, tend to feel too much like the Raimi films. The excitement I get from going to see a new Spider-Man film comes from hoping that I will be thrown into a brand new experience. Instead, I find myself recognizing scenes that I feel have been ripped straight from the Raimi films. Sure, you can call it callbacks, Easter eggs, or even nods to the Raimi films, but it's hard for me to try and immerse myself in these newer Spider-Man worlds when all I ever get are constant reminders of why the Raimi films were so great to begin with. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good things that newer Spider-Man films do that make them special in their own way, but when it comes to certain scenes, I just feel like they keep playing it safe by reusing what already worked in the Raimi films instead of focusing more on being creatively different. When it comes to Spider-Man films, the action sequences are the most exciting things to look forward to. One of the most iconic action scenes is in Spider-Man 2. The subway fight scene between Spider-Man and Doc Ock was just spectacular in every way. The way it concludes is also great, seeing Spider-Man shoot out his webs onto parallel structures, using all his strength to keep everything together to prevent helpless people from reaching their demise. Yeah, when I first saw this play out in Homecoming, I thought it was very on the nose, especially considering that movie was supposed to be Tom Holland's first solo film as Spidey. I appreciated the little nod to Raimi's train scene, but I couldn't help but feel like it was visually lazy. Much like many other scenes I'm going to bring up, these scenes are just a constant reminder that the Raimi films did it first and did it much better. It's nice to see Raimi's influence in new Spider-Man films, but it doesn't help those films to be unique. Newer Spidey films should focus on doing their own thing and rely a little less on nostalgia. This next one shows how the people of New York see Spider-Man struggle, so they decide to band together and help him out. As a New Yorker myself, it was nice to see this shown in the movie. It really brings home the idea that in the movies, the people of New York City appreciate Spider-Man and will stick up for their one and only wall crawler superhero. Of course, Andrew Garfield's first Spider-Man film ended up replicating this with its crane scene. In this scene, you can see crane operators lining up their cranes to help Andrew's Spider-Man reach the Oscorp building. I found the scene heartwarming, but at the same time, it just felt like it was trying to replicate what had already been done before, so it kind of just fell flat for me. Another unique scene that has been stuck in my brain for so many years is this scene where Tobey's Spider-Man uses a car door to slide across the road. This scene was then replicated in Into the Spider-Verse when Miles is carrying Peter trying to evade from the police. Remember the clock tower scene in The Amazing Spider-Man when Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man tried to save Gwen Stacy? Yeah, well Tobey's Spider-Man did it first, and unlike Andrew, he actually managed to save his Gwen Stacy. Ouch. Too soon? Yeah, no, that movie's like almost a decade old, so I think it's fine to make that joke. And yeah, I know, it's based on the comics, so fine. I'll let that one slide. Also, Tom Holland's Spider-Man took a crack at the whole save love interest from falling scene, which was okay at first until it tried to replicate the upside down kiss scene from the Raimi films. And he didn't even get to do it, which, I'll be honest, was quite funny. One of the last scenes I would like to talk about is the pumpkin blade scene from Tobey Maguire's first Spider-Man film. It's one of those scenes that has been engraved in my brain even after all these years. It's so well executed, with a great sense of timing and suspense. Of course, the newest Tom Holland Spider-Man film, No Way Home, had to replicate this scene, but it wasn't done well. I remember being in the theater and feeling like the scene was rushed, almost like it was added last minute. Much like the film overall, the pacing and editing in No Way Home were off. For example, the scene when Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man saves MJ felt quick and abrupt. It completely took me out of the emotion the scene was trying to convey. I'm not sure if it was a problem with the editing, directing, or both, but I was disappointed with how it handled the action scene altogether. It all just felt like the filmmakers couldn't come up with something new and exciting, so they just continued to rely on taking stuff from the Raimi films, which I understand is supposed to be nostalgia bait or whatever, but I mean, I guess it worked. I mean, I literally went to go see it, and so yeah, whatever. The final fight scene in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie is arguably the best one-on-one fight sequence in any Marvel movie ever. It's a brutal, violent, and emotionally charged battle between Spider-Man and Green Goblin. Raimi, who also directed the Evil Dead films, has a clear love for brutal action, and it's shown in this scene. The fight is relentless, with both characters taking a harsh beating. Spider-Man's suit is all torn up, and his face is covered in dirt and blood. The sound effects are visceral, and the setting, an abandoned warehouse, is suitably atmospheric. The fight scene did not hold back, and was one of those PG-13 superhero movies that pushed the amount of violence that could be shown on screen. It all blended so beautifully and delivers a fight scene like no other. Spider-Man was fighting for his life in that scene, and the Green Goblin was just so hell-bent on taking him out. It's a truly edge-of-your-seat kind of sequence that has left me in awe even to this day. Marvel has hardly ever managed to replicate a one-on-one final fight between the hero and villain quite like this one. Well, not until No Way Home came out, of course. I wasn't the biggest fan of Tom Holland's Spider-Man films, but that nostalgia bait really got me once I saw Green Goblin appear in the No Way Home trailer. Once the fight happened between Spider-Man and Green Goblin in the apartment building, I immediately recognized the influence it took from the Raimi scene I mentioned before. It had Raimi's style written all over it. It was brutal, bloody, and intense. I found it so interesting whenever I hear people mention that part as their favorite fight scene in the whole movie. I often wonder if they realize that it's literally replicating what Raimi managed to do in a Spider-Man film. No Way Home brought up this style of fighting again towards the end, even down to the detail of Green Goblin almost being impaled by his own glider. I understand that many of these scenes are supposed to be callbacks, Easter eggs, or nods, but whatever you call it, it's hard to deny the influence Sam Raimi has on Spider-Man films, especially when you consider that these callbacks or whatever are baked into the story of the newer films. Of course, as a longtime Spider-Man movie fan, it's nice to recognize certain scenes that first appear in the Raimi films, but in a way, it creates a problem. When newer Spider-Man films continue to copy the Raimi films, it makes them feel less unique. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man will forever have a special place in my heart. Whether you want to call it being blinded by nostalgia or whatever, I know from watching the newer Spider-Man films that even the newer directors know how special and unique Raimi's films were. They wouldn't be copying Raimi's iconic action scenes if it weren't true. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate newer Spider-Man films. In fact, I think the following three movies do a fantastic job of showing off their own unique styles. They've proven that they don't need to rely too much on Sam Raimi's influence to be good Spider-Man movies. One of these films is very polarizing among Spider-Man movie fans, so I'll start off with the ones that everyone universally enjoys, which are the Spider-Verse movies. Even though I have my fair share of criticism for these two movies, they are definitely in my top 5 favorite Spider-Man movies of all time. I think that these movies have done an out-of-this-world job at being unique. First off, they are animated movies, which is a breath of fresh air from all the live-action Spider-Man movies that we've been getting over the years. These two movies are beautiful works of art that deserve all the praise they continue to get. The overall look of the movie is made up of many different art styles, which makes the movie feel visually engaging. The soundtrack in these movies is also the best compared to other Spider-Man movies. A lot of Spider-Man movies tend to have at least one good song, but Into the Spider-Verse alone has an entire album that slaps. Across the Spider-Verse shares all the same qualities as the movie that came out before it, but it takes it up a notch by introducing more universes and Spider-Man characters, among other things. The last film I would like to talk about that I think is heavily underrated is Spider-Man Far From Home. I already know a lot of people will clown me for saying this, but I actually think this is one of the best Spider-Man movies out there. One reason I enjoyed it so much was because it was similar to how Across the Spider-Verse treated its main villain. Both movies take two sort of silly villains and turn them into serious threats. Since Spider-Verse is a fairly new movie from the making of this video, I'll leave it at that. But for Far From Home, that movie took a villain whose main power is to make illusions and grounded him by making his suit into a motion capture suit, and his power being literal CGI projections. This is so genius in my opinion, and very meta at that. I was very curious to see how Mysterio would work in live action, and after seeing the movie in theaters, I was entirely invested in the character. Anyway, the other reason I think Far From Home is one of the best Spidey films that manages to be unique is thanks to its amazing illusion scenes. The visuals in these scenes are up to par with the Spider-Verse movies. It also manages to pull out your heartstrings with MJ plummeting to her death, which also reminded me of Green Goblin doing the exact same thing with Tobey's MJ, and Tony rising from the dead. All of Mysterio's illusion scenes were a sight to behold, and I'm so happy I was in theaters to witness all of it. Those illusion scenes alone made me hopeful that newer Spider-Man movies were going to be just as creative with their action scenes as Raimi was with his. In conclusion, Sam Raimi Spider-Man films will always be special simply for being the first to tell Spider-Man's story in a unique way that is very much Raimi's style of filmmaking. His take on Spider-Man has been the blueprint for Spider-Man movies for many years, but it's been long enough, and I think it's time for Sony and Marvel Studios to move on from his influence. Instead, they should embrace the new and focus on creating more unique action sequences. With Across the Spider-Verse out in theaters now, Spider-Man films have never looked better. And with Tom Holland's 4th Spider-Man movie set to kick off a brand new trilogy, I am hopeful that the new clean slate will serve to help the movie makers bring in some more originality and style. Thank you for watching.